Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at a new Fantagraphics release called Mickey Mouse and the Amazing Lost Ocean. This is by the writer Fillipi and the artist Camboni. This is part of the ongoing series of books that Fantagraphics is doing where they're getting masterful European artists and they're letting them loose on the Disney characters that they have the licenses to. You can see some of Camboni's just pencil work here on the end papers. It's really beautiful cartooning, really, fluid characters and all that stuff. Then we flip to the inside and you see how that work looks colored. The colorist on this, let me get their name, is Gaspard Ivan, and Silvio Camboni's the artist. Denis Perry Fillipi is the writer. The reason I bought this is because I enjoyed the Donald Duck Vacation Parade so much. That one was all hand painted, and in like some of the previews of this book, it was a little hard to tell whether it was painted or digital. It looked pretty digital. This is a digitally colored book, and in some places that's a good thing. In some places I think it's kind of a bad thing. But we start off here, we're finding some stuff up in the Arctic. Mickey and crew, this is like a steampunk world, so it's not Steamboat Pete, but Steampunk Pete. They're kind of racing to discover these lost treasures and things like that. So you get some really, really beautiful page layouts and imagery like this, really richly colored, where you have fantastic, like Mickey's diving, and it's this fantastic wreck that he's going to find this material that they need to power their ships and stuff. Beautiful art. The only thing I think is that this book was colored on a computer and then it's printed on a matte paper. Tori was looking at it and she said it's really lovely. To me, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing some stuff that probably looked better on the computer, and it gets a little murky as it gets darker. So to me, this maybe was a book that should have been printed on like really high gloss paper to give that like HD look to the color, because I think the color gets, I don't want to say muddy, but like murky as it gets darker throughout. And I'm not sure that the colorist, it may have looked great on the computer, but I think there's a lot of points where things get so dark that like the really powerful silhouettes that Camboni is doing in the drawing gets lost in the coloring. Like I just think it gets a bit mush in here. But then you get these big fantastical scenes like this that are a heck of a lot of fun to look at as well. So then the crew, you got Mickey, Minnie, and Goofy. They're like this crew of adventurers. They're going to go enter this big tech competition. Reward for the first inventor to raise the inaccessible treasure submerged in the Nemetides Trench. So that's pretty much like the plot of the book. We get introduced to a Dr. Einmug character who's going to help them build like a robot. The robot will allow Mickey to remotely dive instead of having to dive himself. You can see some more of the really intensely detailed art. It's in pages like this, though, that I think the coloring could help separate the images out a little bit more. There's almost too much gradients over everything. It's almost like too attempting to look painted to be printed the way that it's printed. There's kind of a time jump at one point in the story, and we enter a really interesting world where now the ocean lives in the sky, and we get these awesome scenes like this where they're living up in the trees, but it still gets flooded as the rain comes through. Again, like really intricate, beautiful artwork, super detailed, but feeling like the objects get lost a bit in the colors. But also, like, I'm partially colorblind, so I don't know, maybe it's just because it's in the reds and greens, but I really think there's a problem with value in the book. Like, things aren't separated enough by value. Like some images like this too, I just think, you know, Mickey's ears are getting lost, Goofy's getting lost, and you can see that in the drawing itself. Like this is another one, it's kind of chaotically colored in terms of separating the space. It just moves from like warm to cool and light to dark over the whole thing, but some of the silhouette is maintained, but by the time you get up to Goofy, a lot of the silhouette of him on the tree is lost up there. So I think the colors could have done a better job acknowledging that the way that things are broken up into stage play and silhouette, that kind of gets written over for this too slick of a look. So that's kind of my opinion of the book, is there's some really beautiful things. Like the artist obviously put a ton of work into it. It's very intricate. But I think the colorist is like taken over a little bit too much. And then in the back here, we see what to me looks like a watercolor sketch by Camboni. And I feel like even though this is still in the muted earth tone palette, there's a much better sense of like separating the different things out. It's not overly rendered. The colors are a little simpler. So I would really love to see Camboni work all on their own. I feel like you'd get kind of a black sad type of look to the artwork that is kind of schlocked over a little bit with the digital coloring. And then the story in this one is fun, but it's just kind of like a fun, silly adventure story. There's nothing deep. I think one of the things I really liked besides the painted artwork in the Donald Duck one is that it was totally silent, and so it was really a master class. Not that this isn't a master class in cartooning and storytelling, but that was so much more at the forefront. That even though it was like a silly, trite little adventure that didn't mean much, it was such a masterful display of storytelling. It didn't matter. This one's just kind of a trite little adventure story that is no big deal in terms of story content. It's just fun. So like definitely not as good of a book as the Donald Duck one, but still for like buying a Mickey Mouse book, this is something that's surprisingly labored over and loved over and a really lavish visual experience. So yeah, like this is one of those ones I don't know that I can give it like you gotta buy it, but just like this is what you're looking at, and if this appeals to you, it is really lush and beautiful. Solid Yellow, Path of the Shades by Clarence Doss is a really cool ongoing project that Living the Line will be producing. Clarence is a PhD student from Fiji who's studying the myths of Fiji for his doctoral thesis. And part of that study project is that he's producing these comics. They're kind of like Hellboy, where there's these little short stories that capture all of these different mythologies. But then he's using that to wrap the project into his doctoral thesis and then provide educational material where people can come to these comics. They don't have to read his PhD thesis. They can come to the comics and get a more consumable version of the mythology of Fiji.